Carla Avila.
And I'm Copie Harris. So our objective today is to talk about a question that comes up a lot from our clients, which is how do you structure the meeting and what are the different roles in the meeting? And our message to you is that there is an ideal meeting structure. It can be fluid, but you've got to have one at least in your head.
And what do you think is the difference between having an agenda and having a meeting structure? Because I think that some people think
it's
that it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So from my perspective, the difference between those two is that your agenda is what you share with your client and you say, okay, here's what we were thinking we would cover today. But your meeting structure is how you are actually running the meeting.
Right.
So it includes things like when do you make introductions and whom do you introduce, and when do you do a time check, when do you deliver your objective, when do you deliver your message, when do you do your dialogue opener.
Right. And one of the most important elements to do, in my experience, is to prepare this way ahead of time so that the people that are coming to the meeting with you, if you're taking an expert on any subject.
And you're not that expert.
Exactly. Then you have the opportunity to plan ahead and they know and what to expect. Yeah. So I think managing expectations around everyone in the meeting, all the stakeholders, is very important.
That's so important, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that our people who've been watching us or listening to us for a while, this is a theme that you're hearing a lot. And one of the reasons that we keep emphasizing this theme is that our clients have not always been doing this pre-meeting preparation.
Right.
And sometimes it's because everybody's so busy and they're traveling so much. But even a phone call, if you're not in the same location, to say to your colleague, here's what I feel my role is in the meeting, here's what I was planning on doing, here's what I feel your role is, let's discuss. What were your thoughts?
Right. You know? And to add to that would be also to have information about the people you're meeting with.
Absolutely.
And have their background and understand what works with them in a meeting. What is there a different set of expectations from them? Culture expectations, are they from a different country? Do they have different ways of conducting a meeting?
Yeah.
And that is also something to consider. And if you do this by having a prep meeting, which I love prep meetings because a lot of things come out in those prep meetings.
Yeah.
A lot of ideas for how to present. Even if the person that is going to be speaking, if it's you or if it's someone else, and they're the expert, that's great. They know their subject. But that's different than being an expert in conducting a meeting and managing a meeting.
Yeah, and what you're talking about right now, it gets to roles as well. Because the person who is the expert, maybe who's speaking on one specific part of the meeting, that person should not be the master of ceremonies. And the person who's expert at running the meeting, I call that person the master of ceremonies. And the master of ceremonies is responsible for the meeting running very smoothly and is responsible for everybody in the meeting feeling comfortable and your client as well, or your prospective client feeling comfortable.
And also responsible for the structure of the meeting.
Exactly. So let's talk about the ideal structure and what order things should come in. Now, this is not written in stone, and in fact, we'd like some of your feedback on this, what you have found works well. But tell me what your ideal structure is.
So typically the introduction comes first. You want to know who's in the room and that everyone knows who is there and what is the purpose of the meeting. And to that point, I think I'd just like to make a quick parenthesis, and we spoke about this, you and I, before, which is make sure that everyone in the meeting has a purpose in the meeting.
Yeah.
So if there's 2 or 3 people coming to the meeting, they should have a role in the meeting.
And probably a speaking role.
Exactly.
I don't think that you should have anybody who sits there and says nothing.
Right.
And even if they're the scribe, where they're taking the notes,
exactly,
they can say something.
Yes. And then the most important thing would be, after introducing everyone, and everyone knows who's in the room, then trying to understand, managing the time. So confirming that you have enough time for what you're interested in discussing. So maybe talk to the client and say, are we scheduled to have an hour meeting? Is that still okay with you? So that managing time, I think, is a very important point.
Very important. So introductions, time check is what we call it, right?
Exactly.
And then I would recommend that you state your objective for your meeting and that you then state your message very briefly. And
some different.
They're different, and some people get confused. So an example I use is that your objective might be to introduce a new colleague.
Yes.
Your message then would be, this new colleague is going to have the role, would have the role vis-a-vis your account of this. So that's the message. The objective is the introduction. The message is what the person's function would be vis-a-vis this client or prospective client.
Right.
So that, I think, kind of makes that a little clearer. So, and sometimes the objective and the message are so close that they're almost the exact same statement, and don't worry if that's the case. And then
but also the message takes us to what are the benefits to the
prospective client or the client.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's important because you want to state the benefit for that person right up front, and the message too, because you don't want to wait until the end of the meeting to deliver the message.
And in fact, the benefit should always be part of the message. If you have, this will help you. If you have the word you in there in your message, it's probably a pretty good message.
Right. And then you have what we've discussed, which is the dialogue openers.
Exactly.
And I love those, because dialogue openers are not only for the beginning of the meeting, which they're important to have at the beginning of the meeting, but you can also use them throughout the meeting. If you need to take back a subject that has been maybe gone on a tangent, or maybe just stop to say, is there anything else we should add here, or should we go to the next subject?
What would you like to talk about? What are your thoughts?
Exactly.
And you put it back into the clients or prospective clients circle and let them speak.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah. And then after the dialogue opener, we recommend that you listen actively, which we talked about yesterday as well, where you reflect what the other person has said. And then, and this seems like it takes a long time, but really it's only a couple of minutes, I promise. And then you get to talk, making your presentation, if indeed that is still relevant.
Yes.
Because you might have heard through, when you listen to your client, you might have heard, oh, I need to just focus on this one segment. Or the client doesn't actually want the presentation that I thought they wanted. They want us to discuss something else.
Right.
So you may not be opening your book. And that may be the best meeting you've ever had.
What happens at the end? I think that's also important to talk about the last few minutes.
Moments of the meeting. So from my perspective, what happens at the end is that someone, and maybe it's the scribe who maybe hasn't spoken up until this point, someone summarizes what they've heard. So what we've discussed today is this, what we've heard is this, we've been talking to you about XYZ, and then you throw it back to your prospective client or your client. What else should we know? What have I missed? What have we missed in this meeting? And wait a moment and let your client speak. Maybe that you've missed nothing. It may be that there's something that they had on their mind that they haven't brought up yet. And then, now I know this is a little controversial, but what I do is I'll say, I've written down that the next step for me is to get this, this, and this for you. What do you feel are next steps?
Right.
And some people feel it's not a great idea to bring up next steps, but I've found if you don't do that, then you leave the meeting and there's no sense of what should follow.
I love next steps.
Okay, good.
I love next steps. It's important because that way you know what needs to be followed up on, and again, you're managing expectations.
Right, exactly.
And I believe that managing expectations appropriately is probably one of the most important areas for success.
Absolutely.
You know?
In life, actually, in so many ways, right?
So thank you very much for listening to us, and if you'd like to get in touch, please email at contact@magicticity.com.
Thank you.